Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar. I'm going to give everyone just a moment here to jump on, so bear with me and we'll get started here in just a few moments. All right, everyone. Good morning, although it's almost afternoon. Hope you've been enjoying some of the nice weather that we've had recently and getting outside a little bit more. This month, we're going to be talking about the 4 biggest retirement gaps for our monthly webinar. Now, this is a presentation that we put together, been going through all kinds of different topics so far this year. So this is a summation of 4 areas that we see a lot of people have retirement planning issues. So this is something that we want to, let me check. I see that I have a hand here. Let me make sure everyone can hear me. If you can hear me okay, just go ahead and either raise your hand or shoot a message in chat letting me know that you can hear me. All right, I'm getting lots of hands up. So I think I'm good to continue. Anyways, so these are 4 key areas of retirement planning that we often see gaps or potential issues where it might derail your retirement plan. So we're going to run through those 4 key areas today. And we also put together a quiz to help you identify which of the 4 might be your biggest retirement gap. So I'll send everyone a link out at the end of this presentation and a couple times throughout so that you can run through that quiz at your convenience. And that'll give you some direction as to where to focus your attention in retirement planning. I'll go ahead and jump into the presentation here. Again, for those of you that haven't been on a webinar before, my name's Josh Leonard. I'm a financial advisor at the Leonard Advisory Group. We do retirement planning. So we help those nearing and in retirement make the transition into retirement. We might talk about Social Security, taxes, estate planning, things like that throughout the presentation today. That doesn't mean I'm an attorney, doesn't mean I'm a CPA, nor am I affiliated with the US government other than being a taxpayer like you all. So that's the summation of the disclaimer there. Couple weeks ago, my wife and I and our 2 boys ran a 5K, 10K race at Kelly's Island. And I run pretty frequently. So for those of you that are on my webinars, I frequently talk about running, or those of you that are clients, I talk about running quite frequently. But this is a race that we really hadn't planned to do. And a few neighbors and friends had said, oh, are you doing the 5K, 10K race? And Yana said, well, Josh, you should do it. And she said, you know what, I'll do it too. So it wasn't something that we had particularly trained for, but we asked when signing up, hey, can our boys come along too? And Yana was brave enough. She said, Josh, go ahead, do the 10K race. I'll do the 5K with the boys in the stroller. So Yana pushed the boys and they ran part of the race in this 5K. So she's the real winner of the race there. But the boys were so excited. They loved participating in this activity. And Eli, my oldest son that's on my shoulders in this picture, told me afterwards, Dad, I want to do more races with you. And in a conversation with one of my friends over the weekend, we were talking about the role as a father, that it's also important for our sons to encourage good behavior and develop good habits for them. So it makes me feel really good that I was able to provide an activity that he's excited about, that's of course good for him as well. So hopefully we can help develop some good habits there. So today we're going to talk about retirement planning, and that's what I want to encourage you to do with your retirement plan. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. Again, we'll have a quiz at the end to help you identify which of the 4 areas might be your biggest retirement gap. But I want to encourage you, like my sons, to have good habits for retirement planning. Again, we're going to talk about a bunch of different areas today. When we look at a comprehensive retirement plan, it's not just tax planning or investment allocation or figuring out where your income comes from or what's the most efficient way to get leftover funds to your beneficiaries or charities of your choice or Medicare selection. There's a bunch of different pieces. A comprehensive retirement plan is going to take all of that into account. So by no means is anything that I say today a comprehensive plan. They're all factors that we should think about in building a plan. So what we'll cover today, the 4 key gaps are the LF gap, the RD gap, the TE gap, and the TH gap. And while we will have a few quizzes throughout this presentation, I'm not going to quiz you on what those mean. They'll make a lot more sense to you a little bit further on in the presentation today. As I've done every month, we will have a drawing for a $25 gift card. I'm going to do it on Wednesday, June 30th, which is a week from tomorrow. For each correct answer during the quizzes that I go through during this webinar, you get an entry into to win that gift card. If you complete the retirement gap quiz that I'll send the link out to, you can also earn an entry through that. And if you follow us on social media, if you already follow us, great. We certainly appreciate that, but that won't get you another entry at this point. I am actually going to pop into the chat function and send you a link out to that quiz, that retirement gap quiz now. That way, everyone make sure that you have it. If you have to leave a little bit early, certainly you should be in good shape there to take that at your convenience. I will also send a link out after this quiz, so everyone has a copy of that as well. So let's get into it. We are going to bring up our first quiz here, and this is the Price is Right quiz. So there will be a poll that pops up for you. Let's see. Here we go. It should be up for you all to view. And the first question that I have here is, what was the base price of a 1980s Chevrolet Chevette? And this was, the list price, not a used car price, or not what it's worth today. But our first option here is $2,835. Second choice is $3,782. And the final choice here, $4,125. I see we're getting some responses here. Our second question in this quiz is, what was the price of the Motorola Dynatac 8000X cell phone in 1983 when it hit the market? This was the first cell phone available to anyone that wanted to buy it. Nowadays we all have these things in our pockets, and although they're still pretty expensive, we found various ways to make them cheaper, like financing them through our cell phone plans or just buying older models. I still have quite an old iPhone at this point, but it continues to work. I wouldn't get as old of a phone here as this Dynatac here. But it looks like we have quite a few answers in, so I'm going to go ahead and end polling, share the answers, and share those results with you as well. Our results here on the first question, what was the price of a 1980 Chevette? The answer is $3,782. The majority of people actually answered $4,125. So some of you got it right, but not all of you. That $3,782 price tag was the base price. You could add an automatic transmission for an additional $320. If you wanted air conditioning, that was a pretty pricey feature. That was $531. If you wanted that AM FM radio, you could tack on an additional $143. So if you got the most deluxe version, that'd be $4,776. So many of you were closer to that price. Now, in today's dollars, if we adjusted that for inflation, it'd be about $15,000. So even by today's means, a fairly low priced car. Now, cell phone prices. The Dynatac 8000X, the price was $3,995, which half of you got correct. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool that you all got it right. I don't know who the heck would have paid that much for a cell phone back then. That would be the equivalent today of about $9,952. Now, this first commercially available cell phone only had 30 minutes of talk time. So I'd burn that up pretty quickly. So hope you guys enjoyed those. Let's get into the first gap, or the little known fees gap. So one of the areas that we see a lot of people not really having a good grasp in their retirement planning is the fees that they might be paying. The bottom line is that they can be a big drag on returns. Many different types of fees are often overlooked, so we miss them in doing an assessment, or we might not fully understand all the fees that we're paying because sometimes they're hard to find. As I mentioned, they can be a big drag on returns. Now, that's not to say that you should avoid all fees. Certainly, we pay fees for a lot of things in life. I am paying for someone to help remodel our new home that we just purchased. And, well, I'm paying him because he's an expert. He's more efficient than I am in that job. And he can get it done while I continue to work and spend time with my family. So that is certainly helpful to me. And I saw I had a couple hands raised there. Sorry about that. And it's worth paying a fee to me. Although if I did it myself, it might take me longer. It would cost me less dollars. So should I avoid all fees? I'm going to go ahead and say no. We need to assess what we need to achieve our goals. So my wife and I have a Toyota 4Runner. We're on the third one that we had. And this vehicle, every time we got a new one, since we got married, I keep thinking, oh, maybe we'll get some other car. And we look at a couple different models and say, okay, well, this car has this feature, or maybe it's a little bit slicker looking. But at the end of the day, hey, you know what? It just costs too much money. It's too expensive for what we need as a family. So I'd rather have a newer 4Runner than an older Mercedes-Benz. Now, if we look at this beautiful Mercedes-Benz here, this would be sort of a dream car for me. The starting price for this G-Wagon, as they're known, is $131,750. I don't have that sort of budget for a car. If you do, fantastic for you, but I don't need to pay for that much. That new 4Runner that we got last year, the list price was just under $40,000, about $39,800, or less than 30% of the cost of this. So I don't need to pay all this extra money to have this fancy car. I can have something that meets my goals of keeping my family safe, having enough space for when we travel, being able to safely drive the kids in the snow. That's all we actually need. So what's the fee drag? What's the impact of a fee drag? Here I looked at really high fees. So we tend to see anything 2 to 4% as really high fees when we're reviewing a portfolio. So let's look at a no fee portfolio over a 30-year time period versus a 2% fee. If we look at $100,000 being invested over a 30-year time period, the green lines here represent that amount at a 6% compounding return versus, let me get that off of here, versus one with a 2% fee. That 2% fee over that 30-year time period would cost you over $250,000. So much like that Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, that might be a little bit excessive. We might not need to pay a 2% fee. Let's run through all the types of fees. So this is where we see a lot of people get confused. There can be loads on funds. There can be revenue sharing between funds. In other words, some fund families pay to participate on certain lists, whether it's in your 401k or through certain brokerage houses or financial advisor offices. There's also 12B1 fees, expense ratios, transaction fees, management fees, custodian fees, account maintenance fees, mortality expense fees, rider fees, investment fees, audit fees, hourly fees, planning fees, fiduciary fees, consulting fees, and I'm sure I could come up with more as well. The bottom line is there's many types of fees. So what do you do? How do you figure out what exactly you're paying? Well, we need to do an analysis of it. So when we meet with new clients, or when we met with you, if you are a client, we ran a report that looks something like this through Morningstar, where we dug deep into the fees. And this was from a client that we met with at the beginning of this year, and we ran some statistics on their portfolio, and we pulled together all the fees that they were paying. We can look at a couple different pieces here to see that, hey, you know what? All in all, their average, so their fund fees here are about 2.35%. And then if we look up, this happened to be in a variable annuity, if we add in their mortality and expense fees, administration charges, they were paying 1.75% there, plus that 2.35% in the actual fund fees. They were paying north of 4% in fees. Now, interestingly, when we look at the performance of this account, it trailed the underlying benchmark, so the same combination of stocks, bonds, cash that they had, by a little over 4% over the last 10 years. We can see that this represented a loss of value to them. Now, sometimes variable annuities or certain tools like that might be essential in your plan. So it might be worth paying a 4% fee for. For this individual client, they were paying for riders and certain things that they didn't need within the plan. So we need to know what fees we're paying, and do we need to pay them? For any of you that are on the call that haven't done this sort of analysis, or if you'd like us to update your analysis, feel free to let me know. You can follow up with an email, and I'd be happy to do a fee analysis for you as well. Let's look at our second gap. Our second gap that we're going to cover today is the risk diversification gap. So I'm going to bring up another quiz here. And this one is going to cover some various risks. So let's switch over here to our risk quiz. I'm going to launch that polling and we'll run through those. So the first question that we have here is, what is the deadliest animal in the United States? Is it 1, a shark, 2, a deer, 3, cows, 4, a mountain lion? So go ahead and jump in the poll there and answer that one. And the second question in this quiz is going to be, what percentage of children injuries caused by BB guns were to the eye? Of course, we have Ralphie here in the famous Christmas Story movie. You'll shoot your eye out. I think every family has somebody that anytime a young kid gets a BB gun, they joke about, well, you'll shoot your eye out. So, I wonder, what is the risk of a child actually shooting their eye out or having an eye injury? So what percentage of injuries caused by BB guns? Technically, this also, I think, includes pellet guns and airsoft guns, but commonly BB guns. What percentage would you say have an eye injury? So it looks like the majority of you have answered these questions. So let's go through the answers. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. I'll share those results with you as well. The first question, 77% of you got right. The deadliest animal in the United States is actually a deer. Deer cause over 1.3 million car accidents each and every year. About 200 of those annually kill a passenger in the car. Interestingly, cows rank number 4, and they kill about 20 people per year. Sharks are number 9, but on average, they only kill a human every 1.7 years. So not as frequently as we might think. Of course, Jaws really pushes that idea that, there's that big lurking danger. And mountain lions, interestingly, only kill a human about every 5 to 10 years. So while they are very, very dangerous, if you come in contact with them, typically they tend to leave us alone. But as you all know, especially in Western Pennsylvania, deer can often be a horrible road hazard. I know I've had a run-in or two with them throughout my lifetime. What percentage of children injuries caused by BB guns were to the eye? The correct answer here is 38%. Only 2 of you answered this correctly. The majority said 12%. So you guys undershot that. So yeah, 38, over a third of injuries are to the eye. Anyways, let's jump in and let's talk about different types of risks. So much like fees, we have all kinds of different risks. And the most common one that clients or prospective clients that we meet with express to us is equity risk. Of course, is the risk of owning stock. So if we look back to 2008, 2009, many people had very substantial losses. Even last year, the S&P was down about 40% from peak to trough, and that should cause you a little bit of unsettling there. But there's many more other risks. If you're too conservative or holding bonds, you might have interest rate risk, where if interest rates go up, you can have risk if you need to sell that asset or you're not keeping up with current rates. There could be company stock risk. So if you have a lot of money invested at your company, it's very common in 401ks where you can buy company stock or have stock grants, things like that. Many times we'll meet with people where not only is their income driven by their employer, but sometimes up to half or more of their wealth is concentrated in that company stock risk. So that's a lot of risk riding on one company. We can also see mutual fund overlap, sector risk, inflation risk, systematic risk, company risk, political or regulatory risk, financial risk, so the risk of if the company ran into financial troubles, liquidity risk, and concentration risk. So lots of different risks. How do we manage risk? Well, there's 4 different ways that we can manage risk. 1, avoid it. 2, retain that risk. 3, reduce the risk to a more tolerable level. Or 4, transfer the risk to someone else. So let's talk about risk avoidance. We can choose, and in this case, I'll just use equity risk or stock market risk. We can avoid that by, well, putting our money underneath this mattress that this cute dog is sleeping on. That will help protect us, but it can also introduce some other risks. So sometimes by avoiding one risk, we enter into a new risk. In this case, if we keep all of our money under our mattress, well, inflation risk is going to come into place. If the spending power of our dollars becomes less and all of the money's under our mattress, well, that money certainly isn't growing to help keep up with inflation. So risk avoidance can certainly come into play and can be a strategy to help mitigate risk, but we need to make sure that we're not overlooking other risks, in this case, like inflation risk. Risk retention, another way is assess the risk and say, well, okay, that's a risk that I'm taking. You're going to retain that risk or keep it. We can see this in portfolios. If we look at troubling times like last year when the market was down 40%, if you have some allocation to equities, your best bet at that time, although they went down in value, was to retain that risk, to hold on to those stocks and wait for them to rebound again. Another strategy we can do is have some risk reduction. So like this skateboarder here, if my son Eli were to see this picture, he'd say, Dad, why doesn't he have a helmet on? And I would pat myself on the back for that one. Luckily, Eli is very risk averse as a child, so he's conscious of wearing things like a helmet when doing activities. Wearing a helmet is a way to reduce a risk of head injury when riding a bike or skateboarding, things like that. So in terms of wealth management, we could say, hey, we can reduce our risk by maybe having more stock or less stocks, more bonds, cash, money market, more stable assets in the portfolio. That would be one way to reduce our risk in our portfolio. Another thing we can do is we can transfer that risk. So If we're reducing risk, we're making our portfolio more conservative. Risk transfer is a little bit different. We can use things like annuities to offset some of the risks in our portfolio. Or if we're talking about direct equity risk, we can also look at options to kind of pad our downside on those. The biggest caution that I always give with a risk transfer strategy is that we have to be mindful of the fees. That example I went through before, where the client was paying over 4% in fees for a risk transfer that they didn't really need to take, we need to be conscious of that price and make sure that it's not hurting us by transferring too much risk there. We commonly transfer risk in lives. So we have car insurance, homeowners insurance, life insurance, and these are insurances that help us transfer some of that risk of a premature death, massive home losses, or if we crash our car or someone crashes into our car and they're not insured, this enables us to transfer some of that financial risk. So we want to do the same in our financial plans. We just don't want to be paying too much for it or transfer off too much risk that it inhibits our return because of those fees. So where do we start? Well, you need to analyze your individual risks. And for each one of those risks, decide on a risk management technique. So if you say, I'm so deathly afraid of the market, I don't want to be invested directly in stocks at all, well, we need to come up with a plan to do that. And once you establish that plan, maybe your feelings change over time. We have clients that at the beginning of retirement, they were very comfortable holding stocks, but now that they're in their 80s, they say, you know what, I'm going to become more conservative. I'm going to mitigate my risk or maybe offset some of that risk because I don't need that high of a return anymore and I have more than enough. So it's something that we need to review frequently to make sure that our risks are still in line with our goals. We use a couple different tools with clients and prospective clients to view risk. This one that we have up here is Riskalyze. This was from a portfolio that we went through with a prospective client last year. They'd scored a risk number 29 on a scale of 1 to 100. It told us that they would be comfortable with up to almost a 4% loss over a 6-month time period for the potential gain of 7%. What we actually saw in their portfolio that you can see on the right-hand side here is that they were a risk number 61. Over a 6-month time period, the way they were allocated at that time, they could have lost about 12.5% for the potential gain of 18.75%. So we looked at using a few different risk management strategies to reduce that risk down to a more comfortable level while keeping in mind that, hey, they still need to make enough money to not run out of money in retirement as well. This is also a snapshot from a Morningstar report. This is something that we look at to make sure that you don't have too much concentration in one area of the market or another. So this Morningstar equity box up here shows us that this client has about 40% of their stock holdings in large cap growth stocks. And while that's actually been really good over the short term, earlier this year, we saw a large pullback in that sector of the market as some of the big tech names started to fall out of favor a little bit. So we want to stay well diversified, or at least understand that we have that risk in our portfolio. I also mentioned mutual fund overlap. This was another snapshot that we did with that client, and looking at the underlying funds in their portfolio, we could see that they actually owned Microsoft stock in about 12 different funds. So while they might think that they're well for the tax efficiency gap. So just like the other ones, we're going to start out here with a poll. I'm going to launch this one here. And we will jump into this quiz. What was the original income tax deadline in the US according to the Revenue Act of 1913? Was it choice 1, February 25th, choice 2, March 1st, choice 3, March 15th, or choice 4, April 1st, April Fool's Day? So that is our first question there. See, a couple people are jumping in answering. The second question that we're going to have on this tax quiz is in 1697 and 1698, Russian Tsar Peter the Great visited Europe in disguise to learn about shipbuilding. Russia at the time was very behind in their shipbuilding, and he wanted to help the country excel. So shortly after his return, what type of new tax did he introduce? 1, a beard tax, 2, an income tax, 3, a property tax, or 4, an import or export tax. Let's see. We have about half of the people voted, so I'll give you guys just another moment here. Okay, it looks like I now have about 3/4 of people, so I'm going to go ahead and end the polling, share those results, and let's run through the answers here. What was the original income tax deadline in the US according to the Revenue Act of 1930? The correct answer there is March 1st. Many of you answered March 15th, about 46% of you. It actually was March 15th after 1918. So they revised to give a few more weeks in 1918. So partially correct, but it wasn't the original income tax deadline. Of course, now we traditionally think of April 15th as that tax deadline, although with coronavirus, it has been shifted here the last 2 years. So what kind of tax did Peter the Great impose after his trip to Europe in disguise? This one I had a more limited, well, actually 54% of you said import and export, and I led you down that path talking about shipbuilding. Makes you think of income, import and export, but actually it was a beard tax. So he came home and famously shaved in a public display, many of his advisors, and people were quite offended by it. And he said that men should not have beards in Russia anymore. He got some pushback after that. So shortly thereafter, he imposed a tax on it. Now, for the very wealthy individuals, to be able to retain a beard, you would get a little coin saying that you paid this tax for it. And that tax could be as high as 100 rubles. So totally random piece of trivia there, but certainly interesting. So again, the beard tax there was the correct answer. So let's talk now about this tax gap or the tax efficiency gap. Many times when we meet with retirees, they've done a really, really good job of putting money away. And for most of us, the easiest way to save for retirement is to put money into our 401k. So hopefully we're getting a company match. We're able to put money away without it entering into the bank account. So that's a little bit easier for us behaviorally to have that money come out before it hits the bank account. Now, one of the problem is most of us have saved in a traditional 401k where all that money is taxable. So it's becoming what we call a tax time bomb, or eventually all that money is going to be taxed, whether it's for you or for your beneficiaries. So we need to be careful there and make sure that we're aware of what the tax implications of our retirement savings might be. So let's think of it in 3 different tax buckets. We have the first bucket that's income taxable. The second is tax deferred. And then the third is income tax free. So income taxable, this can be things like CDs, where you're paying a little bit of taxation each and every year on the interest. It can also be things like investment accounts where you have tax on an ongoing basis. You put the money in after paying taxes on it. You don't pay tax again on the principal, but you do pay on any gains. That's the income taxable bucket. Our next bucket over to the right is tax deferred. This would be like your traditional 401k, where you didn't get taxed on the money going in. It grows over time, and when you pull the money out, it is then fully taxable. And our third tax bucket is income tax-free. Easiest thing to think about here are things like Roth IRAs or Roth 401ks, if you have that option in your plan. This money, you paid taxes when the money went into this bucket, but it grows tax-free. We're not paying taxes along the way. And when we distribute, as long as we follow the rules, we're not paying tax on it. Another thing that can fit in this bucket is properly structured permanent life insurance as well. Let's look at a quick scenario of Dave and Sarah. Here they're looking at converting $100,000 from an IRA to a Roth IRA. So we're going to look at our current tax cuts versus our tax structure that we had before. So in this case, Dave and Sarah said, hey, you know what? We got a lot of qualified money or a lot of money in this tax deferred bucket. We're worried that, well, we're going to have to pay a lot of taxes in the future. So they're entertaining the idea of doing $100,000 Roth conversion here. If we look at the 2017 rules, so prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that cost of their conversion would be about 33% or $33,000 in tax. If we look at the rules for 2020, slightly different for this year, 2021, but the cost of the conversion would be about 24% or $24,000 in tax. In other words, they could save more than 25% by converting now. This is a point that I always want to bring up is, hey, tax rates should go higher in the future. Our current tax cuts are set to expire in 2025. So starting in 2026, we would revert back to these old 2017 rules. So of course, based on your personal situation, it could be a really good time to convert at, in this case, a 25% discount. So you could start unwinding some of that tax bond that we talked about. Again, that conversion, taking assets from IRAs or 401ks over to a Roth IRA, or maybe it makes sense in your situation to set up a life insurance plan as well. That's something that can have some benefits for estate planning as well as, of course, the tax efficiency as well. So moving IRA to a Roth IRA or tax advantaged account. The next area that we can look at in changing or as many times overlooked is tax loss harvesting. So if you have after-tax investments, or if we flip back a few slides here and go back to this income taxable bucket, if you have an investment account with after-tax funds, each and every year you're paying taxes on that. What we can do here, with tax loss harvesting is find some funds or individual positions that have gone down in value to help offset the gain. So we can sell those to help offset some of our gains there. This is a very common strategy in investment planning, but many times overlooked by individuals that we meet. We can also do this at strategic times. Maybe your first year of retirement, your income is quite a bit lower, so we can realize some gains from our after-tax investments and possibly even avoid paying capital gains tax on those. So having that tax plan is certainly helpful in retirement. Another area that we see that's often overlooked is strategic tax spending. So whether that's things like qualified charitable distributions, so after the age of 70 and a half, taking money from your IRA and sending it directly to a charity to help satisfy your required minimum distributions, or maybe you're helping support a lower income family member, whether that's a child or another relative. If you have highly appreciated stock, it might make sense to gift that to them because they would pay less tax on that than you, rather than you selling that stock and then writing them a check or giving them cash, where you would be realizing that higher tax liability. So these are some quick ways that we can help mitigate some of the tax implications. The last of the four gaps that we commonly see is the time horizon gap, or the TH gap. Now we're gonna switch to our last quiz, and I hope you guys are enjoying these. I certainly like putting these together. I'm gonna launch this last quiz here. This is our time quiz. And what is the name of the science of timekeeping? Is it tick-tockology, minology, or orology? I will let you guys answer that one here. And our next question that we have in this quiz is, how many Friday the 13th can we possibly have in 1 year based on the calendar? Is it 1, 2, or 3? So far, it looks like we're getting the second question right. Getting a couple more responses in here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end that polling here. I will share the results. The good news is the majority of you got both of these questions right. So the name, the science of timekeeping, is not tick-tockology. It is orology. And the second question that we had here, how many Friday the 13th can we have in 1 year? And the correct answer here is 3. And this was an interesting random piece of knowledge that I learned. We can have up to 3, and every year we have at least 1 Friday the 13th. Any month that begins with a Sunday will have a Friday the 13th. So interesting tidbit of knowledge there. So let's look at your TH risk, or time horizon risk. So many of us think of our time horizon as that time until we get to retirement. Well, even in retirement, you might have a 30-year or longer time horizon. For some of you, that some of your financial goals are maybe to pay for grandkids' colleges, or establish maybe an education fund for the family. The time horizon for that could even be longer than 30 years. But most commonly, we see a time horizon for people transitioning in retirement of 20 to 30 years. But things changed a little bit in that time horizon. The rules for retirement are a little bit different than when we're accumulating assets. We want to be careful that we have a plug in the boat in this case, so it doesn't sink our retirement. But the rules are a little bit different than during our earlier phases. When you're my age and you're saving for retirement, your time horizon, assuming no withdrawals, might be 20 to 30 years. In retirement, we need to also plan for those withdrawals coming out as well, or what we commonly call the distribution phase. So easy way to think of this is climbing up a mountain is our pre-retirement or accumulation phase. The second phase, the retirement phase, is our distribution phase. So it's a common piece of knowledge that when climbing Mount Everest, more people actually pass away on the descent, coming back down, than they do on the ascent, or climbing up the mountain. So we use this as a similar analogy because many times we see people that were quite successful at saving for retirement transition quite poorly into retirement because they're not taking the new rules into account. They've become very comfortable maybe with taking a high level of risk. They've seen a high level of reward, and then they get hit with a time like 2008, where they're taking a little bit too much risk for the distributions needed from their portfolio. So we want to be careful in this time horizon to make sure that we're factoring in appropriate distributions into our plan. Now, when we go through an exercise of building that retirement plan, we'll ask you about how much you need for expenses and things like that. We certainly want to build a buffer into that so that we have a proper allocation to allow a little bit in excess distributions for some of those surprise expenses as well. So that is our time horizon risk. I am going to shoot out a link to our new quiz once again. So if any of you click on that and complete that quiz, again, that will give you another entry into this month's Amazon gift card drawing. Thank you. It looked like the majority of you participated in all the polls throughout, so I certainly appreciate that. If you haven't already, follow us on social media. We try to send a lot of up-to-date information there as well. I'll post some short videos as well and share things like the link to the recording of this webinar for future reference as well. This is one of my favorite pictures that I've pulled in the last year in building a lot of different presentations, and it has this guy who looks like he's working pretty diligently. He's sawing off the branch of this tree, and as we can all see, as an outside perspective, he's going to be in some trouble once he gets a little bit further through sawing this branch. This is how we feel about these gaps in retirement planning. These are areas that we commonly see people overlook. And we often feel maybe like the way you feel looking at this picture, like, man, how can you not see this coming? So I encourage you to take that quiz. It'll at least tell you, hey, maybe you need to think about taxes a little bit more. Maybe you need to think about your time horizon a little bit more. It only takes about 5 to 10 minutes to do, and it's a resource for you to do. So I encourage you to do that and make sure that you're not missing a gap in your retirement plan. This picture is of me, my wife, and Eli and Isaac, our sons, this past Sunday for Father's Day. And you can see they're a little bit sweaty. They were playing right before we took this picture, but they've given me so many lessons. And again, they help me see things through a different lens. Last week, we had a fun dinner where the boys and I and my parents went out on my dad's boat for an evening cruise and had our dinner on the boats. We had some hot dogs and some snacks there. And as we were sitting at the dock to put the boat into the water, a couple fishermen pulled up on the other side of the dock. And Isaac said, "Get any fish? Get any fish? Get any fish?" And we were all kind of surprised that he was so boldly asking these new strangers, did they catch any fish? And we had a good laugh about it, but the guy eventually said, "Oh yeah, we caught 2," and said, "Do you want to see them or anything like that?" But what we know is that, well, Isaac's going to emulate our behavior. That's a common thing that us adults have done in the family when at the dock. "Oh, was it a good day for fishing?" It's a common question that we ask when we see a fisherman. So although it was quite funny to see Isaac do it, we understand why he did it. So I encourage you to use this quiz as a guideline to just focus your efforts for retirement planning. Hope everyone enjoyed this month's webinar. I was able to keep it under an hour for the first time in a while. If anyone has any questions or feedback, feel free to just reach out to me. We're always here for you. And as always, if you have any particular topics that you'd like me to cover in future webinars, let me know. Next month, we will be doing a quarterly recap with a member of our Morningstar team as well. And we will be launching our retirement success class too. This is going to be a little bit of a more detailed format where we're going to go through some more details of actually building a retirement plan. And this will be broken up into 2 sessions, and they will be held in the evening. So keep an eye out for an invite of those events. And as always, thanks for attending and hope to hear from you soon.